Hey guys, welcome back to CLOWNFISH TV. This is Kneon, and I am here with a very special guest, animation veteran John Celestri. Say hello, Mr. Celestri.
Hi, Kneon. Hello.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me here.
Mr. Celestri is going to talk about his experience in the animation industry. Yeah, he's been working in the animation industry for a very long time, and he's got a lot of stories to tell, I'm sure, and we cannot wait to talk to him. So first, we gotta give a quick shout out to our sponsor, and then we'll be right back. Thinking about printing your own comic books, graphic novel, or manga? We recommend our friends over at PrintNinja. We've been using PrintNinja as long as they've been printing comics, and both the quality and price is excellent. Mention CLOWNFISH TV and get an additional 5% overrun of your book order quantity printed for free. For free! That's free books, people. Just mention this offer on the phone or in the additional information box on the quote request form. That's printninja.com, or click on the link in the description below. All right, guys, welcome back. This is Kneon. I'm here with John Celestri, and we're gonna talk about the animation industry. And John's got a lot of stories, and I'm gonna let him lead this one. He's been working in animation for a long time. He worked on a lot of beloved 70s and 80s properties and movies you're probably familiar with, like the Star Wars Holiday Special. He worked on Rock and Roll. He's worked on Herself the Elf. He's She-Ra. He's been all over the place, and I am really looking forward to having this conversation. Thank you, John, for coming on.
You're very welcome. Just to add to that list of things is the Don Bluth's Space Ace and Dragon's Lair games.
Oh my gosh, yeah. They're bringing those back, I've heard. They're arcade one-up, if you're familiar with them. They make the replica arcade machines.
Oh.
They're supposed to be bringing Dragon's Lair back out.
Well, that's cool. Death scenes were my specialty. That's what the sort of thing. But we'll also add the Batman Zellers commercials that I did.
Yeah, those are cool.
89, yes.
So yeah, I mean, you've worked like everywhere. I mean, I was looking you up on. I knew you did a lot of work for Nelvana, but I was looking you up on IMDb. I'm like, man, he worked on this, and he worked on that, and it's like, I mean, literally almost anything I could think of, no matter how obscure back in the 70s and 80s, it seemed like you worked on it. So how did you break into the animation industry?
Well, I started, just to explain why it seems like I worked on everything. The industry at that time, we're talking about the 70s and early 80s. It was maybe 350 people in the New York City union animation industry, and maybe another 800 in Los Angeles. So you actually knew everybody. Yeah. So everybody rotated from one place to another, and you all worked together, and so that explains why it seems like the same names keep appearing everywhere. But anyway, okay. So how I got started, I always wanted to be a cartoonist. Mm-hmm. Long story short, had it more of an academic background. I'm self-taught as an artist. Mm-hmm. I learned, I wanted to be a comic strip artist and a sports cartoonist. This was during the days of the 60s, where in New York City had about 7 newspapers, and everybody had their own cartoonist and what have you then. So I thought, well, I can get get a chance to show my stuff to people there. But the industry started to change, and newspapers started to fold and what have you. I discovered late in my academic career, in terms of being like 21, 23, 22, 23 years old, that I could do fast sketches. Mm-hmm. And that's how I learned. I found out that I could do the animation posing, picking up movement, think of that. And so I said, okay, how can I use this talent? And I said, I went to the Lincoln Center the Alice Tully Hall, the 50th year retrospective for Disney.
Okay.
And that's when, we're talking about when he did the Alice films.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we're talking, it's 1973 1973 that happened. So yeah, from the 20s.
Yeah.
And so I saw Peter Pan, there, and they're screening it, and I said, that's what I want to do. And that's when I decided I wanted to be an animator. But I was, I'm 24 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of late to start thinking about doing that sort of thing. But
yeah, it's so weird how things have changed, because now at 24, a lot of kids are just, getting out, they're going into grad school or just getting out of college, or it seems like a lot of people now aren't even getting into the industry until they're at least their mid 20s,
Well, yeah, but it was again, the 70s are a completely different time. We're all, back then we were just itching to get out of our apartment, out of our family's places, and getting our own places and whatnot. I was living on West 74th Street in Manhattan in 1972.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And what's that cost now?
The rent for my apartment back then was on the fourth floor of a 4-story walk-up renovated brownstone on West 74th Street. It was about $265, a 2.5-room apartment. Today, that's going for like 10 times that amount.
Oh, easy. It's crazy. So you're in New York, you want to be an animator, and I'm out and I have this pulled up for the people watching this. I'm going to put a link to his Indiegogo campaign. I saw a rejection letter from Disney on here.
Yes.
You tried out for Disney and you were rejected.
I tried out for Disney, yep. If you could see that, what I did was I went to I was looking for what kind of school would teach me animation. And the only thing that I knew of that was, there was a part-time thing, or I was just trying to learn something, was School of Visual Arts. And it had, I did a summer course. It was only 6 weeks, one night a week. And it was like, 2 hours, one night a week for 6 weeks. And that's how I learned animation. I learned some basics there, and it was taught by an old Terry Toons and Popeye layout person, Terry Toons and Paramount Fleischer, and he said, "Well, here's how you do it." And so we learned how to run the camera, the Oxbury stand, and he told you, "Well, here's your exposure sheet, and this is how to do a storyboard and everything like that." So I had learned all the basics, but I was still teaching myself using an old. It's called an Elmo. It was a sound, a 8mm Super 8 sound editing machine, and used those old. Disney had released sections from their features, from Snow White, from Pinocchio, and so I would run it frame by frame to study that.
Okay,
and that's how I taught myself.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, we have a lot of younger viewers. I don't think you realize this is before even VHS. This is before you could just, pause on a frame to learn how to draw things. It was a lot harder. You guys have no idea how easy you have it with the internet now.
Oh, yeah, well, you couldn't get the material.
Yeah.
There was nothing to, if you were lucky if you could get, because they pirated films was a real, they cracked down hard on that.
Yeah.
Back then, But anyway, so they released these home versions that you could, show at parties and what have you. So I learned that, and then I got a chance to get hired on. What I did was I did my film. I did two pencil tests, and sent them off to Disney, and they came back and said, "I'm sorry, you don't draw well enough, but you have a good sense of entertainment." So that was fine. But 5 or 6 months later, I got hired on at School of Visual Arts, rather at the New York Institute of Technology, on Tubby the Tuba.
I do remember that. Yes.
Okay, and that was staffed by all of these old Popeye and Mighty Mouse and Fleischer animators,
Okay.
and that's where I learned for 14 months every day, learning how to in between, how to clean up, and then they would I'd bring in an animation scene of my own, and they would flip it, and they'd give me pointers and such. So that's how I really learned.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing that's really lost today. You know, we talk about education, we talk about learning, and back then, and I think we need to reinstitute this, that we don't see a lot of like a real apprenticeship. People, they go to school now, they get their degree, and they get thrown into the workforce, for better or for worse. But, especially with animation and with comics and in any art form like that, there was, mentoring and apprenticeship.
Oh, yeah, you were part of a team,
Yeah.
Or at least you were part of a group where you could go to somebody who knew a lot more than you did,
Yeah.
Because no one really, unless you were a really top-notch animator, you worked in studio.
Mm.
You didn't work at home. So
Yeah.
there was always this back and forth, which is what we did at Nelvana. So that's that's down the road a bit. So that's how I got into the business. And after doing that, I got onto Raggedy Ann and Andy, which was being directed by Richard Williams, who directed Roger Rabbit. And so I got my chance, to be an assistant, a cleanup assistant, and a supervising assistant on that. And it's from that way. Then I got, I was given, I got a letter from Friz Freeling, who was looking for young talent to go to California, I got the letter said, if you're ever in California, please look me up. And if you're looking for an animation job, come and see me. And that's how I got hired on. It was Friz who hired me to work on, Baggy Pants and the Nitwits and was it What's New, Mr. Magoo.
Yeah. No, that was a whole nother. Yeah, they were kind of had their own. Definitely had a house style, as I recall. But it's interesting. I want to backpedal a little bit to Richard Williams, who sadly passed away last year.
Yes.
And I don't know him. I've never met him. But he is considered like the animator's animator, right? He's a legend. Right. I mean, what The Thief and the Cobbler took. Well, it was still never finished, right? It was like 30 years. I think they worked on that.
Well, he sponsored. That was his baby.
Yeah.
And as everything else in Hollywood, the babies get, they're thrown out with the bath. And things changed, and he did so much. He ran his commercial house in England, London. It was a Soho, and he poured everything, his personal money, into the film.
Wow.
To do that. He spent 15 years. He was trying to get money left, right, and center to do his film.
Yeah.
So
if only they had Indiegogo.
That got messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, if only they had Indiegogo or Patreon or Kickstarter or something like that back then. Again, kids today, they don't know how easy they have it compared to how it used to be.
What was always tough. Here's the thing: is that even as a young guy, trying to get to break in, it was still tough because there hadn't been any new blood in the industry for 20 years. Mm. There hadn't been any new anime students, because when TV came, technology always rears its ugly head in some way, shape, or form. So when all of those Hollywood studios, shut down, where were all the other, where the animators were going to go? So Hanna-Barbera opened up, but once again, so they only had enough work. So from like 1955 to 75, there weren't any new young people really coming into the business. So the average age of an animator was about 55.
Yeah, well, there's a reason they call them the Nine Old Men, right? Because they,
Well,
they
yeah.
have any new blood for a while. But yeah, I mean that is true because you look back, you look back at a lot of the like the great animated movies, and you see the same names come up again and again and again and again, and it's definitely it's a different time, but it took like you said, it was very hard. It was a very hard industry to crack and to master.
Yeah.
So now you're working for First Freeling, okay?
Yeah.
After Raggedy Ann, which is vastly underrated movie, by the way. I remember watching it all the time when I was a kid. And then what happens?
Okay, well, I had done a detour between Raggedy Ann to Friz Freeling. I worked at Nelvana up for Jerry Potterton. Now that name is it should be interesting because he worked on Yellow Submarine.
Oh, okay.
He took over. He replaced Dick Williams as the supervising director because we were behind schedule, over budgeted, and needed to cram it through. And so he came through. This is December. I mean, he had started up. He had taken over for about a few months prior to that, in October, September of '76. And we're working away like crazy. He comes into my room where we're doing overtime, trying to crank out the scenes. And I thought he was going to ask what was my schedule like? How quickly could I get through with this? He said a friend of his in Toronto had an animation studio, and they needed an animator to replace an animator who had broken his wrist, and they needed somebody. And I was expecting one of my in-betweeners to say, well, he'll go there. This person was Canadian and was from Montreal. And he said, I don't want to go to Toronto. So I said, I'll go.
Okay.
And that's how I got up to Nelvana.
Well, that's what it's funny because when we start talking, I'm like, well, clearly he's in the States, but I'm like, how did he get to Nelvana? Is he Canadian? Did he move down here? What happened?
No, well, that's the story. That's how I got got involved with Nelvana. So I did. I worked on A Cosmic Christmas, which is the film that George Lucas saw that from Nelvana and said, I want them to do the Star Wars Holiday Special animation. Okay. And I did the spacemen in the Cosmic Christmas and the parents, Mom, Dad, and Granny. So there's all of that comes into the mix. He sees that at a screening at Viacom, where Nelvana was the animation arm was going to do a series. They had signed a contract to do a series of holiday specials, and A Cosmic Christmas was the first one. So anyway, I'm in at the Patty now, okay, and I get a phone call, and it's one of the producers from Nelvana asking me to come back to Canada, as a full-time job on staff, and I'll get all the paperwork and everything, and and relocate totally up to Canada.
Wow.
For that.
Okay.
That's how I got involved with Nelvana, and it was through knowing working at the various. The best way I can explain it is I got to work with the old pros from the 30s and 40s, and that's where my training comes from. And again, this is. I don't mean to be controversial about this at all, but Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, two of the 9 old men of Disney, they said that it takes 10 years to become an animator. Okay. And I learned, and everybody complains about that. And they said, well, I understood it because it takes about 5 years to learn the basics. Okay. To be solid in your basics. And it takes another 5 years to hone your craft. And then after 10 years, you really have it at your fingertips. That's where that's how it really worked out for me personally. But when I was hired by Friz Freeling, as an animator, even if it was a junior animator, it was still as an animator. It was a journeyman animator. Yeah. It was a validation saying that you can animate, because he was looking at my work.
Yeah.
And it was, and again, I'm backtracking a little bit. That is, then while I was before I got the order, the request to come back and to Nelvana, I tried to reapply to Disney.
Okay.
And I was saying, okay, well, I've got. It was only like 2.5 years between the 2 years. I had my a letter of rejection. So I said, okay, I've got 2 features under my belt, a season with Friz Freeling on as experience. I said, well, I should be able to at least get a consideration. Turns out, according to them, I was too old and too experienced to be molded by Disney.
That doesn't surprise me. Actually, well, it doesn't surprise me at all.
That's why I never went to work. I never worked at Disney. So that sort of ties that little story there.
Yeah, they I don't think it's really the case so much now, but I know for the longest time that they had a Disney way of doing things, and you were basically, if you had the raw ability, they would take you, but yeah, they wanted you to do things Disney's way. And if you're too old, it's kind of like Yoda in Star Wars. Too old for the training. You're too old for the training. It's probably just an excuse, but because older people do cost more. But I think
whatever. Yeah.
But no, I understand. So okay. So where are we at now? You took the roundabout. You got rejected by Disney again.
Yeah. And so now I go back. So then I get the phone call a couple of weeks later from the Nelvana producers, and they said, "Oh, we want you to come in and animate full time for us," because they were already getting ready for to do in the long run their feature, Rock and Rule.
Yes.
They hadn't really called it Drats yet, hadn't done anything, but they knew that they wanted to do that, so they needed people with experience to do that, and I was the only one they knew of that had 2 features under his belt.
Rock and Rule, for those of you who don't know, okay, it's actually one of my favorite animated movies of all time. Love this movie. Love it. And I remember watching it actually when I was a kid on HBO. I think I watched it on HBO or Cinemax. But amazing piece of animation that we'll never see anything like this again, today, because it was such a risk. This movie wasn't it?
Oh yes, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it is a rock and roll movie, but I think it still has because we were so raw when we did it. We were a raw talent, very young. I mean, I was one of the oldest ones there, and when we started on that, I was 30 years old.
Yeah,
and I was one of the oldest people at the studio. So, but it was you could name out their the bands, Cheap Trick, Earth, Wind and Fire, Blondie, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop. Am I missing anybody?
Cheap Trick. Do we get Cheap Trick? Yeah,
we said Cheap Trick. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a who's who of it was almost like they just took CBGB and just dumped them into this movie, right? It was like all the bands of that era, all the punk bands, the early punk bands, Lou Reed, and it was that whole era, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, John, is because that whole era for me was, I don't even know what they call it, when all these rock and roll movies came out in the 70s and 80s, and they were very experimental. They were more adult than they were for kids, and we were seeing crazy things done in animation, 2D animation, that has never been done since, and you just don't see that anymore. It's and it only lasted maybe a decade, maybe. I mean, maybe it started with Fantastic Planet and then just kind of ended by the mid 80s. But it almost feels like they were trying to animate, Heavy Metal Magazine or something. Literally, we had a heavy metal movie in there too. But I wish there was a name for this genre, because we have all these, forgotten, sadly, gems that kind of fit into this category. And Rock and Roll is definitely one of the best. Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, the thing about that is that the characters, just the energy was raw. They were trying to break away. Oh yeah, you had Ralph Bakshi, okay?
Yeah.
Who was doing all his stuff, his straight stuff. He was doing stuff for, because he was on a low budget, and he really didn't want to have more than just one or two takes at all on his stuff. He's a Terry Toon guy.
Oh wow, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was.
But he took over the studio, and he did the last few seasons at Terry Toons, and it was very young when he was doing it. But I think the aspect of it is that the animation that you were talking about was to get away. Well, first of all, no one cared. Okay, it wasn't considered to be a money-making proposition. So those people who actually did these films, like we were over budget at $10 million Canadian on Rock and Rule.
Yeah.
Consider today. I mean, what $10 million is what, an episode of Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
So but we were all doing stuff, and it was full of energy, basically, and that's really what we had going for us. Was raw energy and trying to do stuff. It was a very much of a garage band attitude.
Yeah, and the same with having worked in comics, the same with comic books, in that era, it did feel very, I guess it's pretty appropriate you had the bands in it. It felt very punk. It felt very like there's something in the air with the music, with the art being produced, with all just felt like it all kind of came together,
Well, at Nelvana, it was basically they were all artists or rock and roll musicians. It was really that way. I mean, you could have picked any three people out of the paint department at doing cell painting or Xeroxing or animation. They all could have fit into Omar's band.
Yeah.
That's basically what it was, because they're all, as I said, it's between the ages of 22 to 30. And I think that's why if, when you look at it and just don't try and say, oh, well, don't nitpick it. Just listen to it, look at it, and see and feel the energy coming out of it. That's really what you want out of a movie, So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that movie had a pretty huge impact on me when I was a kid. I actually had one of the first comics I got was they had a Rock and Roll comic book. It was a cinema, and they'd actually taken stills from the movie. Yeah. And it was one of the first comic books I ever bought, and it was really expensive back then. It was like a $5 or $6 comic book, and I remember reading and rereading. In the back, they talked to the crew at Nelvana, and they had interviews and all kinds of stuff. And the one thing that, and I asked you about this actually on Twitter before we talked, that I remember still to this day was they had a whole segment talking about the demon at the end being animated with cow brains.
Right. Yeah.
Is that actually what happened?
Yeah, they used okay. Yeah, what they did was they went and trying to figure out what kind of textures to use. Okay, yeah. So we had an Oxbury camera, a very top of the line animation camera that went up about 8 feet high, and so it was a multi-plane camera. Yeah. And what we did was they would be shooting that and using it. They would they went out to a butcher shop and got cow brains, because they needed texture for the beast, for the body of the beast that comes out at the end. So instead of doing anything, what they did was just poke these things around under camera with different lighting, and then do filters and whatnot, and coming in and out and doing all sorts of different ways to bypass later on, because everything was done in camera, or at least you would have that was definitely a money shot, that they would spend the money on that. But that's what they did. And so instead of trying to draw this stuff and animate it, well, you've got that already there. So yeah, that's very true. They use cow brains.
I don't think Disney ever would have used cow brains, you know, for anything. But no, it's so cool because you think about like now, you know, kids today, they're like, oh, I got my texture pack with my Photoshop and my whatever. It's like, no, dude, they use cow brains. That is hardcore. That is hardcore. All right. So you're working. So we skipped the holiday special a little bit. You talked. Now you did all of Boba Fett's. You did all of Boba Fett's?
I did all of Boba. Yeah, I did all of Boba Fett. Yeah. Okay. I animated all of it. I had assistants and cleanup artists to work with me on that. So yeah, that's what I did. That it was kind of what happened is that after about 3 weeks. I did a whole bunch of scenes, and I come back into the studio, and I was away for Thanksgiving, and came back, and I was told, well, we need you to do the hero, Dan Mouse, because the animator who was doing it couldn't handle it, and he left. And so that's what happened. I got switched over to do Dan Mouse because there was a lot of him to do.
Yeah.
He did a lot of singing, and there was a lot of songs and whatnot, and so Frank Nissen, the designer of, he was sort of the head animator there, and he went back and did the Devil, but they had to remove all of the stuff that I did because it wouldn't have worked. Our styles are totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't understand that. Like especially older school animators, everybody has almost like a fingerprint. You can see, that's like I said about, I saw with your Batman stuff. I was like, man, it kind of reminds me of Richard Williams a little bit because there are certain things that certain animators do, even with the Disney movies. It's not as homogenous as it is now. Like you're going to work in the house style, and everybody draws the same.
No, everybody had their own style. Yes.
Yeah.
You develop it. In fact, one of the scenes that I worked on DePatty Freeling on the baggy pants, a villain. It's just it's an innocuous scene. It's just a villain gets up from a hospital bed, and he wakes up and then gets up and then turns and walks off. Well, now how would you? A friend of mine that I worked with, like at Nelvana, pointed out to me that when I showed up, he said, "Did you do that scene where he gets up?" And so it described it exactly. How would he know? But he knew my style.
Yeah, that's one thing, because we're talking about Raggedy Ann and Andy. And a lot of people have it in their probably like, why are you talking about Raggedy Ann and Andy? It's like, no, the movie was actually really, really good. But the one thing that jumped out at me, even when I was a kid, was all of the actors in the movie were all animated by a different person. And they actually gave everybody credit. So-and-so did this character. And you can see it when you watch the movie. You can see there's a difference in style between the different people working on it. I mean, it all works, but it's not like now where a lot of these movies, it's like they could just replace people and you would have no idea who's doing what scene.
Yeah, well, and that was the case. I mean, some people could not handle all of the same the characters, like they had some people working under them. But you still had, Tisa David was doing Ann and Andy. Art Babbitt was doing the camel with wrinkled knees. What was his name? Who did the Taffy Pit?
Was it Greedy? Wasn't it the Greedy?
The Greedy, yeah. The Greedy. Oh, geez, what is his name? I'm having a senior moment. Anyway. They were all had their own, they had their own specific style, and you could see as soon as one, if you had to match with them, it was very difficult to do. So they handled all of the major, scenes and allowed others to work around them.
Yeah. So it's interesting because even when I was a kid, like I noticed sometimes like there'd be a scene that would have the primary character and then maybe like Raggedy Ann and Andy would come in, but they wouldn't look quite the same in that scene as they did in the other one that was just them by themselves. You know, and as a kid, I didn't understand, like, how come they look a little shorter, a little squatty, or a little whatever, and it's because that wasn't the main character that animator was working on. They just happened to be in the scene with him, you know?
Right.
So little things like that. But, again, you don't really get that, I think, with the kind of the production line approach to animation now, where you've got, 100 people working on Elsa's hair or something, you know?
Well, that's the thing is that it is completely different. You know, you can't do, I mean, an animator back then, I mean, you had your pencil, your paper, and your feelings for what the character was going to be. Then you put design on top of that. But you could animate a scene with just stick figures, with just circles and eyes and arms here and there. You could follow the movement and the acting. You could do that, and then and once you've got that done, then you throw everything else on top of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and people don't seem to understand the underlying, and that's the same with any drawing, really. Any craft is the underlying structure of it, not the window dressing, but you got to understand how all the moving parts work, and then you can paint it.
Right.
So just like building a house, I always tell people it's like building a house. As long as the insides are good, that's whatever color you paint it, that's whatever. But you got to make sure everything's going to work and the house isn't going to fall down.
Yeah.
So okay, so you're still in the van. Did you work on the Care Bears movie? Because I know that came after.
Yeah, I did that as freelance. After I left, I was already at what was it?
Was it Filmation?
No, it was before Filmation. It was in between a Bluth and Filmation. I was at Ruby Spears.
Oh, Ruby Spears. Okay, that was like now. Okay, I always got confused. Ruby Spears' relation to Hanna-Barbera is what? Because they were
jobbers. They did outsource material. They were a union shop.
Okay.
But what it was when Hanna-Barbera had a ton of money, a ton of shows, and they couldn't handle it even within house, they would use Ruby and Spears.
Okay, because some of the Hanna-Barbera shows had just Hanna-Barbera, and other ones had at the end they had Hanna-Barbera and Ruby Spears, and that's kind of
that's where I was doing Turbo Teen.
Oh, I remember Turbo Teen. Turned into a car.
Turbo Teen, and also worked on. I did one or two episodes of the Dragon's Lair TV show.
Yeah, it's weird because I remember that was a weird time too. Every video game had a TV show, didn't they? They had Pac-Man, Cubert,
the monkey, Donkey Kong, or
they
whatever.
had was it Saturday Supercade or Saturday, where they had a bunch of different video games. Yeah.
That was it. But the one of the most memorable things for me was this was again I was working at Ruby and Spears, and I was just going to lunch, or I was just in the hallway or whatnot, and suddenly I see this short guy, really tough-looking guy, with somebody, big tall guy behind him helping him along and whatnot, and I realized as he walked past me and into the elevator to go upstairs, it was Jack Kirby.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. That's good. They crack a smile. They crack a smile.
No. I think he had a cigar in his mouth or something, and that was that. Oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was why he was doing all his. He had started to work for the shows, designing.
Yeah, he Thundar the Barbarian, I think, was his, wasn't it? And I remember that he did a lot of Alex Toth, I think. Jumped ship to animation too. He was doing, Johnny Quest, and it's kind of like today. You get a lot of comic book artists jumping ship to movies and video games.
Right. But the thing with the Star Wars Holiday Special, we had a very short turnaround time.
Yeah.
And so. That was something that we were very conscious of, and so, as I said, I managed to get well, as recompense for for being taken off of the devil, I got to do the villain in the next show.
Yeah,
So,
which is pretty cool because we actually saw more Boba Fett in the holiday special than we did in any of the movies.
yeah.
Like he was like, you have to be watching Return of the Jedi and be like, hey, that's that guy worked on, now he's down in the pit and now he's gone and he's been burped up, and that's it.
I realized that I said, after I'd seen the trilogy, I said I played Boba Fett more than any other actor.
Yeah. So I gotta ask you, have you seen The Mandalorian yet, John?
No, I have to say no. I don't get Disney Plus.
Okay. It's I'm sure you've heard this from many people. It's basically a live action version of some of the sequences we saw in the holiday special. They even got the weapon, the pitchfork weapon, the what they call it. They've got a Star Wars name for it, Ambin Phase Pulse Blaster, which hasn't been seen since the holiday special. I'm all, it's the holidays. I'm really got this post-holiday thing going on. But it hasn't been seen since then. It was not seen. Boba Fett didn't have that gun in the movies, but they gave it to the Mandalorian on the show, which I thought was kind of a cool nod to what you did. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. I've seen some clips of it on TV, where I see, Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, tilting his head up and down and then pulling out his blaster and sort of slink. He does this gunfighter shift, and I said, well, that's how I have him backing away to get out of into the airlock at the end, last scene of the holiday special.
Yeah, it was really straight. Like, watch. I love The Mandalorian, by the way. I don't like the Disney sequel trilogy at all. That's a whole nother. That's several hundred videos we've done. But I did like. We did like The Mandalorian, and watching it, yeah, I was just like, that's from the holiday special. That's from the This is basically the holiday special in live action, is what this is.
Well, so, there you go.
Hit him up for some royalty checks.
Well, at least no royalty at all. Except the thing is that no one can say that they did Boba Fett, animated Boba Fett, other than myself. So it's kind of like, okay, it's like being Shane,
Yeah. I just thought that was very cool. And they know, on some level they know, because we went to Star Wars Celebration in Chicago this year, and the only thing I picked up, and I sent you a picture of it, is I got my animated Boba Fett lunchbox. My wife got it for me, and that's the only thing I wanted from the show. They had all stuff, and I'm like, no, the only thing I wanted was that Boba Fett lunchbox. And I think they knew, because The Mandalorian was coming out, and I think that was kind of their way of saying, hey, this is really where this came from.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's good, because it's a very interesting. It's you just say, okay, I did that. That happened, and you just say, okay, that's part of my that's part of my DNA or whatever. I don't know.
Well, it's cool though. It's cool that they've got so many references to it, and I think I heard they were going to bring it out on Blu-ray or something, the holiday special, after all these years. But
well, maybe they should just do the short. I mean, that'd be done that way. So.
Did you work on droids or Ewoks, or was that after?
No, I was asked to direct, to be the go-between between Nelvana and Lucasfilm, to do that, to do the storyboards and whatnot. But I knew, that the craziness of what would happen, I just wasn't ready. I just didn't want to do it. That is not the type of, and it wouldn't have been a very good, other than a general, paying job. But I knew what kind of problems there would be story-wise, that having to do the fix-ups of the storyboards and all that. I just didn't want to do it. That was what I consider to be a smart move on my part.
Yeah, maybe you dodged a bullet, but I do know that the droid designs were kind of lifted from the holiday special.
Very
similar. Yeah. So I mean, obviously it was Nelvana, but I remember, actually I saw the droids before I saw the holiday special when I was a kid, and I was kind of like, why do they look this way? And then I saw the holiday special years later. I'm like, oh, I get it now. It's the same people. Did this. So that explains it. But So tell me about you. You did some work for Filmation. We talked a little bit before. You worked on the original She-Ra, and that's something we talk a lot about on the show because it is my wife's all-time favorite cartoon series.
Mm-hmm. Well, She-Ra and He-Man, and then worked at on the low budget features that they were trying to do. They were trying to figure out a way to keep things going and doing their versions of Pinocchio and Snow White and what have you.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they were trying to do it, and this is again before the Mouse Detective and before Roger Rabbit and before the Little Mermaid. This was at the time when Disney was actually thinking of shutting down the animation department, and so there was really not much money in the business for animation, and so Filmation was trying to not just they were getting a certain amount of money from He-Man and She-Ra, but they didn't own the property, so they were trying to figure out ways of doing what was in versions of fairy tales that were in public domain, and figuring out a way to crack the home movie market, at least doing that sort of thing. So the budgets were non-existent.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're right outside Pittsburgh, and they had kind of a shrine to Lou Scheimer here. They had a lot of his equipment because he's from Pittsburgh, and that was in the Toonseum. I think, unfortunately, they shut it down. But it was really cool to see a lot because they did talk a lot about some of the lesser-known Filmation endeavors, beyond He-Man and She-Ra. And unfortunately, a lot of them didn't quite work out that well. But
yeah, and that's unfortunate. But that's actually, Lou was the best, boss I worked for.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good about him. Yeah. He respected the artists. He really respected people, and he was trying to keep all animation, with under one roof and doing everything in the United States. And you can't do anything other than respect a man for doing that. Yeah, we heard. There's a show, I don't know if you've seen it, it's on Netflix, John. It's The Toys That Made Us, and they talk about the history of the toy industry, and they did an episode on He-Man, and they actually talked to Erica Scheimer, and she was explaining her dad basically pushing for 65 episodes for syndication to make sure everybody had a job all year round. Which I thought was really cool because, like you were saying, the journeyman, the freelance life, and he wanted to make sure his people were taken care of, and that's why he pushed for, talking networks in the 65 episodes. Like, no, you have to do 65 episodes, and he gave him some reason, but basically it was to make sure his people had work all year round, which I thought was incredibly cool.
Yeah, that was part of, well, first of all, they were going to do a syndicated show. You needed, a season. If you're going to do a daily show, you needed to have 65 episodes because you can't repeat the same, same show, more than once every 13 weeks.
Yeah, because you get like that one kid that would tune in once, tune in a couple of weeks later, be like, it's just reruns. You lose your audience real fast. How many times can you reread the same comic book, especially if they keep re-releasing it? Yeah. That's why when I was a kid, I loved the Choose Your Own Adventure books because you could read them more than one time and you'd pick a different ending. I always cheated. I always went to the back and saw what the best ending was and then worked my way backwards, but that was me. So I want to talk a little bit about your Indiegogo, and then I want to talk about maybe some advice you have for people that maybe want to get into animation now, or maybe tell them not to get into animation now. I don't know. But,
you can't tell somebody not to do something. All you could do is give them some advice of how to survive.
Right. So I have your Indiegogo pulled up. Rough sketch and an animation comic book portfolio, and it's got a lot of the properties we talked about here. We've got, of course, Boba Fett and Batman and Dragon's Lair and Rock and Roll. Highest possible recommendation, people. If you haven't watched it yet, track a copy down. It's an amazing movie. I friggin' love it. And yeah, so what will people get if they back your Indiegogo, John?
Okay, there are at this point, four different levels. If you just want to do the assistant animator, that's $10, and you get a DVD, or rather a PDF of a rough sketch, which is 84 pages, and then you get also one of my Snuffy and Zoe books, which is what do you do with a stinky pirate?
Okay.
Okay.
What do you do with this stinky? No, you got to back it to make sure.
Yeah, no, there's a song. I've written down lyrics for a song, so it's one of the inside pages, and you get that. And it's so you get that for $10, and so there's that. For assistant animator, you get that's the assistant animator. The journeyman animator, in the middle of the track, is you get a full copy, print copy of rough sketch, and then also the PDFs of the two books too. Okay. And then that's for $20. As a master animator, you get those elements there, plus an original Boba Fett sketch that I'll draw. That I'm drawing. Yeah, and you'll see what the pose is. It's all going to be the same pose, but I'm still drawing it brand new for each one.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you get so that's for $40, and that's all has for shipping. And then the last one is the John the Animator special. I think it is called. I can't remember.
Yep. I'm looking at it right now. Yep.
Okay, and then that has. You get all of that plus a second copy of, there's some people who wanted more than one copy of the book, so this one is $60, and you get two copies and the sketch and the PDFs. Okay,
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of good advice in here, and that's people don't understand. Even in comics and animation, obviously, that. They might be like, well, this advice doesn't apply to me. This life story doesn't, because things are so much different now than they were then. But I don't believe that. I think that you can always learn from people who have been there, done that, and you need to know where you've come from to see where you're going. And, we have a lot of people that watch this channel that are really interested in the animation industry now. Obviously, it's changed a lot. A lot of people would say it hasn't changed for the better, but it has become more, I guess, I don't know, it's more assembly line now, but...
It's always been an assembly line. I think what it is, and I thought about this, and that is, you have to understand, drawing. You have to be able to understand composition. You have to, study composition. Just do, whether you do use pencil sketching or on a tablet or what have you, but understand posing, quick sketch, understand balance of characters, understand what makes something works, learn the principles of animation, the squash and stretch, time. It's like being a musician. You may just have a computer to do all your manipulations on, but you better understand how how music is made and why those notes sound the way they sound. If you understand all that, then when you're given an assignment, say a computer animation assignment or what have you, you will be able to make something breathe and give life to it without doing a rotoscope or having to deal with relying upon motion capture. Even when you're a kid, even when you're just given fur, well, how does that fur flow? If you're making it flow, how do you make it? How do you give it a feeling of softness?
Yeah. It's amazing to be able to do that with a pencil, isn't it? To have all that texture and life and movement. to do that to be able to do that with just a plain old pencil. And I think a lot of people, with digital technology, I can't say anything because I work primarily on a digital tablet now anyway, just because of speed. But there's definitely, I think, something lost when you rely too heavily on technology now to do the work for you, do the thinking for you.
If the electricity goes out, you still have to draw.
Yeah. Well, we talked about before we recorded, and I'm gonna send you a link to the video. It's really funny just talking about all this. But Toy Story 2, I don't know if people know the story, but we almost lost Toy Story 2 because it was 100% digital, and somebody at Pixar had accidentally deleted the entire movie. And the only reason there's a Toy Story 2 now is because a woman was working at home. I don't know if she's one of the producers, I think, or storyboard artist, but she had an entire copy, a backup of Toy Story 2. And that's the only reason we have that movie. If it had been obliterated, there weren't any cells to go back to. There wasn't any kind of a hard copy at all. So I agree with that. I think you need to have some kind of a hard copy.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about, John, before we go?
Well, I'll just give just a plug for the next crowdfunder, which is when I start launching the John the Animator comics, which is I'll start doing my Snuffy and Zoe series and Mega Moose, and it's aimed at basically it's like the types of comic books that I enjoyed reading when I was from the ages of say 5 and 6 up until I was 12 or 13, so it has that still kind of golden age comics in the 50s and 60s kinds of storytelling, one story, complete story in each book. So, and those are my next projects.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to see you doing some comics. We need more comics, good comics. I know, it's funny you mentioned that because I worked on Disney comics for a number of years, and that's one thing I loved about the Dell comics, the Donald Duck comics, was it was kind of a one and done story, and then we kind of just, sometimes you carry the characters over, but for the most part, you could pick up any comic on the rack and get a complete, beginning, middle, end. And now with comics, it's like, well, you got to buy these 9 comics, and then we're crossing over with this other series, and you've got $150 investment, before it's all said and done. And
no, I want to do entry-level comics.
Yeah.
People that get into comics, and the only way you can do that is by not making it so astronomically difficult to get into a storyline.
Yeah.
So that's my thought.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought, and I think more publishers need to think like that, but they're thinking, money and trying to get people hooked. But I'm like, if you got, if it's too expensive and people look at it and they're like, I'm going to invest too much in this multi-whatever arc story, I don't care. They're not even going to pick the first issue up. They're like, right. I'm not going to do this. So, okay, all right. Can you give me some links where people can find you online, John? Well,
you could see, on YouTube. You can go to, just type in John Celestri, and I'm there. I got my animation, my YouTube channel, where I do stories, give you lessons on the principles of animation and such. So just type in John Celestri, and you'll be able to find me there. Even if you just type in John Celestri on Google, I'm all over the place. Well, really, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, you are. I actually did. I was like, let's just make sure I know what all you worked on. I'm like, holy smokes, he's worked on everything.
Well, my blog is up. It has a lot of lessons that I did. Is my johncelestri.blogspot.com, and then also it's John Celestri at Celestri John on Twitter.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will put links to all that in the description for this video. So, John, you're more than a man, you're a resource. So, and I would absolutely suggest anyone who wants to get into animation or just, drawing to, absolutely check out John's stuff. He knows what he's talking about. He's been doing this for a long time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, guys, we're going to wrap this one up, and we will talk to you later. Hey, guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.